Welcome to the Deep Dive. You know how it works? You give us your reading list, and we extract the crucial insights, the stuff that really sticks with you, so you can get informed without feeling overwhelmed. Think of us as your guides through the information jungle.
And today we're venturing into a particularly rich, thought-provoking landscape. Our listeners shared a translation of The Message of Life by Ibrahim Nagi, a work that first appeared in Arabic back in 1949. It's a fascinating look at a huge range of topics through a singular lens.
Absolutely. And when we say it covers a lot, we mean it. Nagi starts with the big questions about the origin of life itself in the chapter also titled The Message of Life, then moves on to explore, the role of literature.
The definition of civilization, the complexities of psychology.
How the mind works, the roller coaster years of youth, the art of seeing clearly through criticism, even the world of politics and the power of storytelling.
And he doesn't stop there. He also delves into modern European literature, ethical principles, the unique spirit of Russian literature, the sometimes puzzling realm of modern art.
The lasting impact of parents, and finally, that universal quest for happiness. It's a real intellectual feast, and it's all dedicated to a friend, simply AM, whose inspiration Nagi credits for the whole thing.
A nice touch.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the message of life. Nagi jumps right into those fundamental questions, doesn't he? Where did life come from? Was it just a lucky cosmic roll of the dice, or is there a bigger plan at play?
And are we the only living things out here?
Right. Those huge questions.
He does indeed. He immediately tackles these immense biological questions, suggesting that even a basic understanding of life's beginnings could illuminate the underlying message of those who inhabit it.
Makes sense. Start at the source.
He then introduces the contrasting ideas of Darwin and Bergson. As you mentioned, Darwin offered a very, mechanistic perspective.
Cause and effect, natural selection.
Exactly. Seeing life as a chain of cause and effect, with natural selection driving it towards what he termed perfection survival of the fittest in a biological free-for-all.
Right, nature as a ruthless editor, constantly pruning and shaping life.
Precisely. But then comes Bergson, who, interestingly, started as a follower of Darwin, but later famously diverged. Bergson proposed an élan vital. Think of it as an inherent drive or spark that pushes life forward.
Like a life force.
Kind of, yeah. Also aiming for perfection, but with a key difference. He strongly criticized the purely mechanistic view, particularly concerning selection. How, he wondered, could a random, purely mechanical process truly distinguish between what's fitter and less fit, better and worse?
That's a crucial point, isn't it? Just blind chance doesn't really explain the directionality or the apparent intelligence we see in the way life adapts and evolves.
Exactly. It feels like something's missing in just pure randomness.
Nagi seems to be highlighting this tension between a purely accidental universe and one with some kind of inherent direction.
Exactly. Bergson suggests an intelligent, selective force that actively cares for life, guiding it from a less good state to a better one, overcoming obstacles and ensuring its ongoing growth and survival.
So not just random, but maybe deliberate unfolding.
That's the implication. From these grand biological questions, Nagi then shifts his focus to the idea of a message, particularly within the context of literature, bringing in the Arabic word adab, which he notes carries these dual meanings.
A refinement and invitation, polishing the soul and opening up.
Exactly. It's like the word itself has a built-in duality, suggesting both an inner process and an outward reaching. What's fascinating here is how Nagi traces the evolution of this term.
Oh, so.
Initially, adab primarily signified the refinement of the soul, an inner cultivation. But then its meaning expanded to include an invitation to general knowledge as a means of achieving that refinement.
So things like medical and legal texts started being considered literature because they were seen as contributing to a person's overall cultivation.
Pretty much. It's as if the definition became so broad it risked losing its original, more focused meaning on inner development.
Got it. Too broad.
Precisely. And the Arabs themselves recognized this shift, distinguishing between adab al-nafs, the refinement of the soul, and adab al-gars, which refers to the accumulation of knowledge.
Okay, so soul stuff versus knowledge stuff.
You could say that. As sciences and cultures advanced, adab al-gars began to overshadow the soul refinement aspect. This then led to the question of whether everything written prose, poetry, history, scientific treatises could truly be considered literature in the more profound sense.
Right, where do you draw the line?
Nagi, it seems, is making a case for a narrower, more discerning definition. He argues for a more specific, almost curated definition.
Okay, so what does he land on?
Exactly. He proposes that literature should be reserved for what he terms high literature, or artworks that possess a sense of permanence, a timeless quality that is passed down through generations.
Stuff that lasts.
Right. This high literature can also encompass other art forms like music, singing, and architecture, provided they share the same fundamental origins in human experience and differ only in how they are expressed. He observes that this aligns with the Western concept of literature as the pursuit of beauty.
So Nagi's establishing a framework where true literature isn't just about conveying information, but about something deeper and more enduring. It's got to have that lasting quality, that beauty.
Okay, so Nagi's laying the groundwork for his understanding of literature. He then goes on to define literature itself, and it centers on this interplay between what's real and what we imagine.
Right. Reality versus imagination. How does he frame that?
He views nature as a raw, dry reality that requires human interpretation, explanation, and crucially, the infusion of imagination. This dynamic interaction is at the heart of his definition.
So we don't just passively receive reality.
No, we actively engage with it through our imaginative capacities, and literature is the record of that engagement.
And he breaks down the creation of literature into these essential components: emotion, idea, and movement or imagination. He even uses this striking metaphor of emotion as the fuel,
The idea as the craft or skill.
and movement imagination as the very life force that animates it. This leads him to define literature as either the imaginative portrayal of life's realities or the imaginative imitation of life's realities.
So imitation, but with imagination layered on top.
It's not just about copying life, but about reinterpreting it through the lens of our inner world.
What's fascinating here is his emphasis on the imaginative aspect as absolutely fundamental to truly capturing and conveying those realities in a meaningful way. It's not simply a factual recounting. It requires that spark of creativity to resonate with a reader.
Makes sense. You need that hook.
And then he introduces the element of rhythm, which I found particularly insightful. He talks about its primal impact on us, how it's perhaps the first sedative we experience as infants through lullabies and the rhythmic beating of a mother's heart.
That makes perfect sense, that deep connection to rhythm from our earliest moments. And he argues that this inherent rhythm in art, whether it manifests in the meter of poetry, the melody of music, or even the recurring patterns in visual arts, has this almost hypnotic, captivating quality.
Yeah, it gets under your skin.
It can move us and engage us on a fundamental level, even when we don't fully grasp the language or the underlying structure. This leads him to identify the first primary function of literature, to be a truthful, imaginative portrayal, expressing reality not just with intellectual accuracy, but with an emotional resonance that gives it wings.
So, given this understanding of what literature is and what it aims to do, who is actually capable of creating this kind of impactful literature? What specific qualities does a writer need to possess, according to Nagi?
Okay, the first quality he emphasizes is intense sensitivity, what he terms conscious contact with life. It's about being deeply affected by the world around you, having a heart that is easily moved, eyes that truly see, senses that are keenly aware.
And a spirit that is fully alive to experience. He even quotes Keats' idea of life as a valley in which souls ripen, through both joy and suffering, through conscious engagement with all of life's experiences.
So it's not just passively observing life, but actively feeling and absorbing it. You have to let it in.
Exactly. And the second crucial quality he highlights is insight, being a visionary. Someone who can perceive beyond the immediate surface of things, who can glimpse distant realities, or who can illuminate the ordinary in a magnified or uniquely symbolic way, revealing deeper meanings.
Seeing more than what's just there.
Right. This insight is what ultimately calls the writer to create. So it's a combination of deep feeling and the ability to see beyond the obvious.
And how does the writer typically respond to this inner call? Nagi poetically describes it as a spontaneous cry that can take one of three forms. A cry of wonder at the beauty or mystery of life,
A tear of sorrow or empathy for its pain.
or laughter at its absurdities or joys. That's quite a spectrum of emotional responses that can fuel creativity.
It is, and this initial response, he says, is what he calls the golden gesture, where the raw emotion instinctively seeks the guidance of thought to find the most effective and artful way to express itself.
Emotion meets intellect.
Basically. This then leads to the entire process of literature, which Nagi explores in significant detail, breaking down the journey from initial experience to the final work.
He really dissects it, doesn't he? From being profoundly affected by an experience to this internal, almost irresistible urge to bring it to light in a unique and compelling way.
using carefully chosen language and employing a specific persuasive approach that allows the reader to perceive the hidden beauty or significance.
He even distills this whole intricate process down to a concise formula: experience, expression, communication. It's like a mini-map of the creative act.
Which, in essence, beautifully captures the entire arc of literary creation, from the initial spark to its reaching an audience. Now, let's delve a little deeper into this literary experience itself. Nagi explains that it can originate from a single incident, a profound idea, or even just a seemingly ordinary scene.
But it's always characterized by being rich in vivid imagery, powerful symbols, and a capacity to evoke what he calls a sincere emotion. It's about those moments that resonate deeply within us.
And he has a very particular understanding of what sincere emotion truly entails. It's not just any fleeting feeling, is it?
No, definitely not. What's his take?
He describes it as a heartfelt conviction that is built upon a solid foundation of genuine enthusiasm. It's not something artificial or contrived, nor is it simply a lament or a wallowing in sorrow. Instead, it's a kind of suppressed emotion.
Suppressed. How so?
Like a powerful feeling, often pain, that a strong and mature soul can contain within a calm exterior, ultimately offering a sense of consolation and perhaps a touch of melancholy rather than just raw, unfiltered pain.
Ah, so it's channeled, refined almost.
Exactly. He even references Keats' own self-criticism regarding emotions that merely stir pain without providing any solace, emphasizing the importance of this almost therapeutic aspect of true literary emotion.
This deep and sincere emotion then acts as a powerful catalyst, stirring the imagination, which Nagi beautifully personifies as the magic hand that ultimately shapes the literary work.
Yeah, the magic hand. I like that. He even offers a psychological explanation involving the interplay between our external world of experiences, our conscious world of emotions, and our vast subconscious world of imagination.
How does that work, according to him?
What's fascinating here is his explanation of how, during these moments of intense emotional experience, the usual barriers between our conscious emotional world and our subconscious imaginative world seem to dissolve or become more permeable.
The walls come down a bit?
Kind of. This allows the initial experience to be absorbed in a more holistic and unified way, rather than as fragmented pieces. The subconscious then takes this raw material and reassembles it, adding layers of nuances, subtle gradations, vibrant colors, evocative lights, and meaningful shadows, almost like the creation of a dreamscape.
Wow, so the subconscious is like the artist's workshop.
It's a process of internal transformation. It's as if the subconscious takes the raw ingredients of the experience and, through some mysterious alchemy, transforms them into something richer, more resonant, and more universally understandable.
He also touches on this idea of an initial overwhelming magnification of the experience in our minds, followed by a gradual alleviation of that intensity through the act of artistic expression, often occurring in the quiet reflection of night.
Right, like the act of creation is itself a form of emotional processing and healing. The very act of giving form to the experience becomes a way to understand and integrate its initial impact.
Makes sense. Getting it out helps.
Nagi then moves on to discuss how literature uniquely blends different kinds of sensory perceptions: sight, sentiment, or feeling, and intellectual ideas, giving the simple but powerful example of joyful eyes.
That phrase perfectly encapsulates that blending, doesn't it? It's not just seeing joy externally, it's seeing it manifested in the eyes, implying an inner state.
Exactly. He contrasts this integrated experience with other art forms like sculpture, which he sees as primarily engaging our sense of touch, and music, which primarily appeals to our auditory and emotional senses.
Emphasizing the true and profound beauty in literature often arises from this seamless integration of feeling with other sensory and intellectual inputs. It's the layering of experience that creates depth.
And then he makes a really interesting and subtle point about the use of language itself, specifically favoring what he calls the spirit of the word, with all its inherent implications and suggestive shadows.
Over the direct word, which he sometimes considers deceptive, almost too simplistic, or even infantilizing in its lack of nuance. He's advocating for a language that hints and evokes rather than just stating facts.
Yes. This idea of inner music as the hidden secret of symbolism is quite profound. It's about the suggestive power of language, those unspoken layers of meaning that resonate beneath the surface of the literal words.
It's what allows a poem or a story to mean so much more than just the sum of its parts.
Absolutely. This eloquent suggestion, as he terms it, is what gives symbolism its enduring strength and profound impact. He sees tapping into this inner music as a key to the future direction of literature, suggesting that the power of evocation will become increasingly important.
And he wraps up this chapter.
He concludes this initial chapter by emphasizing that while his discussion has focused on literature in a broad sense, these qualities of intense sensitivity, insightful vision, and the artful use of language apply even more powerfully to poetry, which he considers the most elevated form of human expression in its most significant contexts.
It's like poetry is the distilled essence of what literature can achieve. Okay, shifting gears now, we move on to Chapter 2, aptly titled The Message of Literature. Here, Nagi takes a different approach, focusing on how we understand the life and impact of a truly exceptional individual, a genius, by examining them through multiple perspectives.
Right, using Socrates as his central example. He brings in Plato's philosophical accounts, Aristophanes' comedic portrayal in The Clouds, and Xenophon's more biographical and defensive memoirs.
It's like viewing one complex individual through three very different lenses, each offering a unique angle on his life and legacy.
What's particularly fascinating here is how these diverse portrayals shaped public perception of Socrates, not just during his lifetime, but for centuries afterward. Aristophanes' satire, while likely intended as purely comedic, actually had a profound and lasting impact.
Even influencing the judges at his trial years later.
Wow, exactly. Nagi points out that Socrates himself famously attended the play and, rather remarkably, wasn't at all bothered by the mockery. He even stood up during the performance so the audience could see the man being satirized.
That's incredible composure.
Yeah.
And he stayed friends with Aristophanes.
Apparently so. This really underscores the potent influence of narrative, even when presented as comedy, in shaping public opinion and even historical memory.
That's an extraordinary level of composure from Socrates. It really highlights the power of storytelling, even seemingly lighthearted storytelling, to mold how we see individuals and their ideas. It makes you think about the role of satire in society even today.
Indeed. Then you have Xenophon, whose primary aim, according to Nagi, was to present Socrates as an ordinary, albeit virtuous, man.
Almost downplaying his genius.
Essentially stripping away any sense of radical genius or groundbreaking originality. It was intended as a defense against the accusations leveled against him, but almost by downplaying his intellectual significance.
This really underscores the importance of considering the author's intent and perspective when we look at historical accounts.
For sure. Nagi emphasizes that to get a fuller picture of Socrates, we need to read all three of these accounts together, especially considering that Plato and Xenophon only knew Socrates in his later years, whereas Aristophanes knew him during an earlier period of his life.
And Nagi clearly regards Plato's dialogues as the most crucial and reliable sources on Socrates, even directly refuting the suggestion that Plato simply invented these conversations and ideas.
Right, he bases this on the observation of how Socrates' centrality in the dialogues shifts over time. The earlier dialogues place Socrates firmly at the center,
while later, Plato's own voice emerges more.
Exactly. This gradual shift suggests that Plato wasn't merely using Socrates as a mouthpiece for his own preformed ideas. Nagi then provides some key biographical details about Socrates, estimating his birth around 469 BC and dividing his life into three distinct phases: learning, inspiration during military service, and his crucial mission after the war until his death.
And that mission stage, when he was active in Athens and Plato was with him, is key.
He underscores its significance, and this was a deeply transformative period in Athenian history, wasn't it? The age of Pericles, a real golden age.
But also the Peloponnesian War and the unstable democracy afterwards that led to his trial. A society undergoing immense change.
Precisely. Socrates, even early in his life, became widely known and connected with people from various social classes. Nagi mentions his friendships with prominent Athenian figures like Critias and Crito,
showing his broad social circle.
He also addresses the significant and at times controversial relationship Socrates had with Alcibiades.
The handsome, influential young guy, there were rumors.
Rumors circulated suggesting their bond went beyond that of a teacher and student, but Nagi strongly emphasizes Socrates' well-established personal integrity, even quoting his rather sarcastic response. "Indeed, I am a master in the art of love,"
suggesting his character stood up despite the gossip.
So, having established this multifaceted context around Socrates, Nagi then outlines 6 specific aspects through which Socrates' life and influence can be examined.
Okay, what are they?
They range from his rather distinctive physical appearance and simple attire to the core elements of his character, the unique nature of his school of thought, his often critical stance on prevailing Athenian culture and religious practices, and finally, the various attributed miracles or perceived hidden signs associated with him.
It's a comprehensive framework for understanding his impact.
Yes, he provides a very detailed and well-rounded picture. Physically, described as having a large head and nose, rolling eyes, a peculiar gait,
Quite a look and character.
constant sarcasm, even self-deprecation rooted in his belief in his own ignorance but pursuit of truth. That's key. His unique teaching method, too. No formal school, no fees, calling students associates.
Companions in inquiry.
Right. Despite his ascetic lifestyle, he was physically robust. Nagi summarizes him as overwhelmingly emotional, thoughtful, mystical, and sarcastic, mentioning his experiences of stupor, trances, inspirations.
Like an inner voice?
Something like that, yes. And then comes the really pivotal question of Socrates' religion, or rather, his stance on the religious beliefs of his time. Nagi astutely points out that Socrates' critical mind would inevitably scrutinize any established doctrines.
He wouldn't just accept things blindly.
What's particularly insightful here is how Nagi carefully outlines the three primary religious belief systems dominant in Athens then. First, Orphism soul as exiled deity needing purification.
Okay.
Second, the mainstream religion based on myths and poets' sayings, which Socrates openly critiqued, leading to the charge of searching for new gods.
Ah, that makes sense.
And third, the emerging scientific philosophical approach of the pre-Socratics, focused on the universe's physical laws. Nagi notes Socrates' frustration with all these frameworks.
And he forged his own path.
Exactly, one that emphasized practical living, ethical conduct, and treating others fairly. That was his focus, for the time being, as Nagi puts it, how one lived now.
And he recounts the famous story of the oracle's prophecy declaring Socrates the wisest, and the profound psychological crisis this triggered within him.
Right. It led to his lifelong mission of trying to understand this by engaging in dialogues and focusing on the care and purification of the soul. It seems his whole philosophy was a response to that challenge.
Precisely. Now let's shift our attention to Chapter 4, which explores the message of civilization. Here, Nagi employs a very engaging approach by presenting a dialogue between a philosopher named Jode and his inquisitive daughter.
A nice way to unpack a complex idea.
It allows him to explore civilization, starting with the daughter's initial, somewhat superficial ideas. Beautiful clothes, fancy cars, shops, technology, the things that often come to mind first.
Which are indeed the trappings of modern society. But Jode quickly challenges these, pointing out that even children and servants might have such things, pushing her towards a deeper understanding.
Beyond just material possessions.
Exactly. She then suggests machines and technology, but Jode again pushes back, emphasizing that civilized means something honorable, more than just progress. He guides her by asking her to name truly civilized individuals.
And she comes up with Beethoven, Shakespeare, Raphael, artists, and thinkers.
So she begins to grasp that civilization isn't just about what we have, but about what we create, the beautiful and enduring things like music, poetry, and painting. A lasting legacy.
Right. Jode stresses it's not the machines themselves, but the invention behind them. The beauty and greatness of human thought creating something new.
And this innovative thinking, he explains, is fundamentally rooted in free thinking, the ability to explore ideas without constraint.
And what, according to Jode, are the key obstacles that can hinder this crucial free thinking? What prevents a society from truly flourishing intellectually?
Primarily, he identifies a lack of safety and security.
Fear of punishment for challenging ideas.
Right. And perhaps most significantly, a lack of sufficient time and leisure. He argues that a truly civilized society requires a baseline of security and some leisure, often provided by technology and stable laws.
Allowing people to move beyond basic survival.
Exactly. To dedicate energy to innovation, intellectual exploration, cultural renewal. This leads to his summary of the essential pillars: creating beautiful things, art, creative free thinking, science philosophy, upholding just laws, politics, economics, and security leisure, fostering good social relations.
And he distills these four pillars down into two even more fundamental concepts: relations of goodness and relations of free thought.
Nicely summarized. Attributing the first mainly to religious reformers and philosophers emphasizing ethics, and the latter to scientists driving intellectual progress, he highlights their essential interconnectedness.
He points out philosophers engage in theoretical free thinking, expanding our understanding, while scientists use practical free thinking for technological advances, providing more time for innovation.
What's particularly insightful is his strong warning against self-forgetting, or resignation after societal failures, seeing this as a threat to progress. He sharply contrasts mere material progress.
The civilization of sweets, luxurious but fleeting.
Exactly. He then looks back at ancient Egypt, viewing it as based on remarkable art and good governance, linking their artistic brilliance to societal affluence and security.
And he underscores the crucial role of writing.
Absolutely crucial for establishing and continuing civilization by transmitting mental concepts and knowledge across generations. It's the recording and sharing of ideas that allows building upon the past.
And then he poses a really critical question. Why do ancient civilizations ultimately collapse?
He emphasizes the danger of becoming too insular, too focused internally, and the necessity of being outward-looking, of striving to be civilizers of the world.
Not just existing within borders. He uses examples like barbarian raids on Greece, the Hyksos in Egypt.
Stark reminders that no civilization exists in a vacuum. He then turns to anxieties about contemporary civilization, stressing the need for social justice, political and economic.
He criticizes vast wealth inequalities, leaving many without time for learning, health, art.
And he points out how internal economic distress can often underlie external conflict and war.
He even shares that poignant anecdote of King Amolu Khan's visit to England, shown military prep but little culture, symbolizing the modern focus on destruction.
Highlighting the paradox. Advanced machines could alleviate suffering, but unjust distribution prevents it.
He concludes this section somewhat pessimistically about shackled political minds, misery, forgotten wisdom, biased thinking, the burden of survival.
But he offers a glimmer of hope. Acknowledging flaws is the essential first step towards healing.
All right, let's now dive into Chapter 5, the message of psychology or personality and its formation. Nagi begins by questioning our everyday understanding of personality, pointing out it's far more complex than casual chat suggests.
Right, not applicable to animals or sullen individuals. He uses that Bismarck anecdote to show complexity.
What's particularly fascinating is his call for a more scientific approach. He suggests ascending the ladder of creatures, noting the absence of personality in simple life forms.
Like cells and insects. The key, he argues, is identifying the something new that emerges as life gets more complex and social.
And that something new is linked to instincts, which he defines not just as survival drives, but as more complex tendencies, social habits almost.
It's crucial to note his clarification. Instincts are biological, neither good nor evil. He distinguishes them from emotions. Fear triggers flight, but flight is the instinct.
He mentions the behaviorist's view of conditioned reflexes, but disagrees for humans.
Arguing human reflexes become rational based on consciousness, our awareness of others and society.
So true human personality hinges on recognizing this relationship between self, others, and society, this rational conscious awareness.
Precisely, that's the dawn of personality. He then delves into the interplay between the human alloy, intellect, emotions, inherited traits, temperaments, and the environment in shaping personality.
Acknowledging unknowns and the nature versus nurture debate. He mentions Professor Berg's view, personality, as interaction between environment and hereditary potentials.
I found his point about acknowledging weakness in the alloy as motivation, not shame, particularly insightful. He briefly touches on other factors, physique, instincts, glands, hormones, mind, noting limited control over them.
So we're between potentials and environment. Potentials need defining, environment colors us.
He emphasizes acknowledging deficiencies to strive for perfection, the inherent struggle even in embryos. He defines personality as the effect resulting from the interaction of human characteristics with the environment.
Stressing it involves internal struggle leading to a unified result, unlike conflicting souls.
And he brings in Mencken's vivid depiction of confronting the situation. The confronter, the fleer, the destroyer.
Adding the artist as a unique fleer who turns escape into art, a compelling image.
It is indeed. Now let's turn to Chapter 6, the message of the mind. Nagi starts with the age-old problem of defining the human mind, its role as a key human trait, initially focused on self-preservation.
He then traces its evolution through 3 stages: the impulsive, justifying primitive mind,
The analyzing psychological mind.
and finally the objective scientific mind.
What's insightful is his description of the primitive mind acting first, justifying later, often biased. He notes we still see this thinking today.
Then the self-aware psychological mind analyzing motivations, followed by the objective scientific mind seeking evidence.
He discusses the third stage emerging after the Middle Ages. The independent mind, Descartes' pure reason, evolving into the modern mind integrated into society but maintaining independence.
Nagi defines it as that adjuster that enables us to proceed through life. Using the train analogy, consciousness is fuel, cognition is driver, will is as brakes.
A useful visualization. He defines consciousness here as awareness of others' existence, importance, equal rights composed of knowledge and emotional enthusiasm to act.
Not just knowing, but caring and acting.
He then raises a fundamental question about the mental entity that chooses, selects, connects, referencing Bergson's view of the world as a vortex driven towards perfection.
Requiring a guiding hand with the human mind and language aiding this shaping process.
Exactly. What's striking is his assertion that the mind hasn't fully shed primitive tendencies. He discusses early belief in hidden forces, uncritical acceptance, imposed traditions.
Concepts like purity, impurity, early morals. He notes this primitive mentality resurfaced in the Middle Ages and persists today.
And he delves into why this stalled. He details two phases of the Middle Ages mentality. Early, religion mingling with philosophy but relying on authority. And later, rejection of earthly thought, evolution of the devil to sin, Inquisition.
And simultaneously, the contradictory rise of human arrogance, believing man is the center of the universe, a complex time.
But then, humanity's intellectual awakening, shaking off the dust, proclaiming the mind's potential, the call for control over nature, led by thinkers like Bacon.
Nagi summarizes Bacon's call for the empirical scientific method, liberation from the past, using mental traits for creative thought, a real turning point.
And he argues the next step is a more sophisticated social and economic scientific mindset, reconciling individual and society, establishing rational economic systems.
He references Robinson's view that past reforms, intimidation, education, preaching, failed, necessitating a reform of human intelligence itself.
To overcome savage thinking, superstitions, bias, glorification of the past, instinctive belief, conservatism, a call for critical engagement.
He notes the continued thinking with a Middle Ages mentality of sin, punishment, reward, contrasting this with the needed practical, experimental, scientific, economic mind focused on facing world problems with knowledge and economy.
He concludes with Mencken's picture again. Man facing change, either balancing, destroying, escaping, or denying failure through art, artists, writers, poets.
Let's now transition to Chapter 7, The Message of Youth. Nagi begins by observing that discussions about youth often focus on societal mistakes, failures of teachers, leaders, parents.
He summarizes traditional attempts to reform youth. Education, leading to culture but not always good citizens. Punishment, reward, ineffective. Preaching, ineffective and less artistic. Religious education, potentially reformative but faith-shaken.
Then he introduces psychological reform, Schiller, as a new support alongside faith, understanding the inner workings.
He emphasizes that reform must start with understanding the child, mostly fuel, impulses, limited intellect, inherited traits, a naive motor driven by emotion, stubbornness, selfishness, will to power, plus imagination, the little savage.
A view of childhood needing careful guidance. Nurturing involved handling their wild will, stormy emotions, anger, fear, destructiveness.
Aiming to temper stubbornness not through violence, but by building reason through habits. He powerfully emphasizes habit formation. Habit forms thought, thought forms character, and character forms destiny.
Discussing dispersing negative emotions, like whistling in danger, channeling energy constructively.
He makes the interesting point that blind obedience and habit formation in childhood paradoxically leads to later freedom. Mind is a path carved by habits.
Connecting youthful mistakes like lack of punctuality to poor childhood habits. Long-term consequences.
He moves to adolescence puberty, a critical stage, discussing handling the will to power. Violent subjugation leads to conflict withdrawal. Extreme leniency fosters dependence delinquency.
Noting many children lack both a complex, free, and altruistic personality by this stage, a delicate balance.
He introduces the corridor of the corridor, pre-adolescence where reasoning is formed, emphasizing teaching abstract thought free from bias, suggests family councils.
Adolescence itself. A new world, active glands, flourishing sexuality, temptations, vague fears, conflict between real image and imagined adult self.
He highlights the hidden revolution at home, adolescent rebellion, finding comfort at school, need to recognize and interpret this.
Warns if adolescence follows a childhood with complexes, youth will be complete hell. Considers the meaning of sex in adolescence, imagination, deification, idealism, potential aversion due to fear of new control.
Explains causeless sibling conflict. Mentions call to prevent mixing sexes. Notes adolescent talk about sex is often fabrication. Action comes later. Lists adolescent traits. instability, multiple goals, recklessness, scattered thought, daydreams, Oedipus complex.
And these errors often carry into youth. Extended selfishness, conflict from complexes, recklessness, destructiveness, defiance, emotionally imaginative impulsiveness, conflict being the most important error causing misery.
He defines mature adulthood as freedom from these. Complexes resolved, positive outlook, balance, altruism. Freedom from complexes means non-pathological conflict.
Lists potential conflict areas: truth, reality, imagination, reality, ideas, emotions, desire, demand, spirituality, material dealing, human, inhuman, individuality, obedience, constraints, freedom, self-perception, others' perception. Unresolved conflict leads to misery or personality disintegration.
Adds a note on youth love. Consider it serious, not just calf love. Involves life's hopes, need for stability in a partner representing dreams. Caution against dismissing it, but distinguish from adolescent superficiality.
Presents remedies for youth errors: honest self-view, realistic budget of demands, flexibility, not limpness, to harmonize with environment, personality as cohesion, purpose, interaction. Success lies in means, not just goal. Recognize errors as natural, not humiliations.
Outlines educator's role. Know some errors lead to perfection. Exploit adolescent idealism, enthusiasm, heroism, provided they don't become conflict, impulsiveness, opportunism.
Concludes youth errors often stem from the educator and past issues, advocating prevention before they occur.
Moving now to Chapter 8, the message of criticism. Nagi starts provocatively. Does true literary criticism even exist? Notes consensus, even among reviewers, is often no.
A challenging start. Why of the lack?
Preoccupation with news over thoughtful reviews, unless author famous. Haste, the rush, prevents thorough reading and writing. Quotes Almazni on this.
He explores attempts to distinguish reviewer versus critic, hasty speaker versus deliberate reviewer, giving a picture versus placing pictures in context for value, private words versus moving particular to general, equaling artist, subjective opinion versus reaching enduring aesthetic constitution, Remy de Gaumont.
Criticism should take us from chatter to permanent values. Uses the police versus judge analogy. Reviewers often ignorant police lack a judge whose judgments are like literary laws.
Describes the ideal judge: withdrawn, knowledgeable, building sincere judgments on taste and understanding of the literary process. Aware of past opinions but not bound, considers present era's mentality. Such judges rare, prefer isolation.
Nagi's motivation for discussing criticism. A return to modern critics. Abercrombie, Richards, Murray, Lind. Due to conviction, a new time needs new awareness, new criticism. Says emotional experience leading to expression is a generalization.
Highlights strange phenomena: ambiguity in values, obscurity in standards, disappearance of criticism amidst luxury of chaos, Geoffrey West, or unchecked production indicating indifference, lack of connection control.
Emphasizes need to dissect this new consciousness. Suggests a missed support. Literary heritage, tradition, the link with the past. Notes current dismissive view of valuable works like Diwan al-Hamasa.
Discusses conflating approaches, fixed lines versus subjective interpretation. Wishes disturbance was only between objectivity, subjectivity, logis, emotion, word meaning.
References a past era where criticism was based on sound instinct, like religious faith. Explains modern critics' comparison of consciousness development to religious belief development. Early consciousness drew from strong external source, creating cohesive literary religious consciousness under established systems. A unified, pure mind.
Explains continuation in Middle Ages. Religion seeking help from philosophy. Contrasts with the Renaissance awakening. Individual subjectivity, inner consciousness, limiting mind's authority, asserting spirit's independence. Notes parallel divisions. Society, revolution to democracy. Religion, skepticism. Literature, rejecting classicism for romanticism.
Quotes Bonamy Dobre on the era's triviality, absurdity, fading values amidst questioning. States we're in a transitional era of doubt, disdain. Quotes Tolstoy on importance of complete feeling of life for art criticism. Notes contemporary stories depict bleak disillusionment, leading to amputated literature.
Advocates a new optimistic stance, questioning as the entrance to criticism.
Since philosophy and art define human values, critic needs mentality of both philosopher and artist, emphasis on latter with strong mental activity. Reiterates classic dualities, mind, emotion, etc., largely falling into classicism, stability, and romanticism, liberation. Observes continuous effort across generations to move from classicism's restrictions, though these become part of structure.
Summarizes trend. Successive generations give rein to spirit over mind, feeling over logic, the present generation's direction. States classicism, Eliot, outdated. Romanticism, Joyce, cannot be fully unleashed.
Poses the question, What value does the modern future critic seek? Critic must place work among stable human values, moving particular to general through awareness of human life. Quotes Chekhov. Immerse in life to criticize literature.
Defines value of literary artistic work as value recorded in human life. Describes work as room with two doors, one overlooking life experience, one leading to life. Communication. Inner room. Thought, emotion, word, meaning, image, shadows, music, harmony, rhythm, the kitchen of experience.
States artistic work dredged by amount of human feeling, balance, mind, emotion, thought, meaning. Finally, questions work's benefit to communication, impact on present literature society, value relative to general literary heritage. This is the criticism of the future.
Let's now turn our attention to Chapter 9, The Message of Politics. Nagi starts by saying, considering political behavior just as mind and management is outdated due to modern psychology, citing instinct.
But cautions against applying psychology arbitrarily. Needs nuance.
Introduces McDougall's view. Instincts drive human activity, including politics. Mentions his classification of primary instincts and emotions.
Presents Wallace's contrast, denies mind's role, defines instinct as inherited tendency towards specific behavior, sees mind as a bridle for instinct's emotional aspects, poses question, relies solely on social psychology.
Argues human political behavior is non-instinctive, part of social heritage. Reasons unclear, but impact undeniable. Suggests need to test women's political behavior. Elections, propaganda, parliament, admin, for new insights, correct psychological errors.
Concludes we're at beginning of understanding. Revisits instinct as inherited tendency towards specific behavior. Compares to instinct as a social habit. Both differentiate individual society, dispel group mind, myth, Rivers. Society is individuals, its behavior is individual behavior.
Defines socialism two ways. Disappearance of private ownership, individual equality servitude to group herd characteristics. Argues herd instinct remains despite changing appearances. Cites Rivers' anecdote about primitive man mocking saving banking. Notes instinct's flexibility.
Presents Rivers' opposition to Wallace. Inheritance includes acquired traits, significant new principle exaggerated by Russians' remanual skill. Instinct refined and inherited with refinement. Uses Rivers' herd instinct example. Foundational in sound mind, departure is sign of mental disturbance.
Moving to Chapter 10, the message of the story. First, distinguishes short story from novel, different despite connections. Notes few Egyptians attempt novels due to breadth, effort needed. Most try short stories.
Acknowledges everyone has a tale. Publishers get long stories from real events. But hesitation to publish despite style realism poses question. What makes a story if well-narrated life tale doesn't?
Introduces Chekhov's wisdom. Maturity is knowing when to stop, what not to say. Mentions his long drafts and deleting. Discusses arrangement, presentation, crucial role. Example, altering verse changes flavor. Uses Quranic verse example. Concludes mere narration doesn't tell a story.
Response to tale is from life, argument. Bare reality lacks strong impact. Quotes Hazlitt's two wings. Primaries, reality, realistic experience, and secondaries, poetic experience, shadow scholars added by author. Scarcity of poetic experience makes stories weak. Essence lies in these two experiences, analyzed into characters' dialogue, conflict resolution, beginning-end.
Contrast mechanical structure, build house, furnish, with instinctive form innovator, Lawrence. Story grows like tree. Trunk, branches, leaves, fruit. Internal growth determines external form. Notes Lawrence Wolf's free approach based on Darwinian responses motives, interaction between human Souther's environment events.
Lacking traditional conflict plot but having continuous interaction. Describes the story as fast, colorful, fleeting.
Acknowledges enormous effort of materialistic method followers for harmony. Flaubert. Anecdote. Thackeray writing only 12 lines evening on Vanity Fair.
Cautions free method leads to chaos in hands other than Woolf, Joyce, Lawrence. Notes Lawrence's meticulousness, rewriting habit.
Poses question, what is artistic flavor? Suggests story can become clever brainwork, leading to isolated intellectual aristocracy focused on societal differences.
Contrasts with Russian art, Dostoevsky, Chekhov. Mind surrenders to spirit, flashes of spirit, vast depths. Human spirit won, class divisions disappear, revealing unified emotion.
Difficulty of Russian art. Analysts need similar spirit to understand pains. Sensitive spirit addressing another, confessions without clear beginning-end, reflecting vast spirit world. Possibility of ending mid-conversation.
Let's transition to Chapter 11, the message of modern European literature. Notes increased closeness of European intellectual trends due to world wars. Cites Spanish Civil War as global phenomenon. Poets, writers participating with Pensard.
Defines modern era, beginning shortly before WWI, or by individuals, Eliot's Wasteland. Highlights phenomenon. Prominent names during renewal, not always true innovators. Hopkins, Rimbaud.
Briefly mentions Hopkins' delayed publication profession, Rimbaud's brief life, Eastern-flavored poetry, possibly Egyptian. Notes many unknown innovators are young geniuses dying early, remaining amateurs.
Expresses astonishment at scarcity of innovators compared to numerous evangelists of renewal. Germany, Russia. Asks, what is this new call? What is new poetry?
States modern poetry must keep pace with modern times life. Be accessible, close to people, not ivory towers. Two aspects, scientific character and speed.
Details scientific character. Contemplation, scrutiny, doubt, experiment, poetry penetrating core truths, depths of souls, not margin.
Explains character of speed, focus, brevity advocated by early modern schools like imagists, post-Victorian, late Georgian.
Argues scientific character made literature realistic, connected to life, but scientifically dissecting robs artistic value. Clarifies. Calls for using scientific tools, doubt, analysis, induction, not making literature scientific.
Notes great impact of radio, cinema, press. Many works, fleeting glimpses, swift images, moment-to-moment literature. Pictorial style of imagists and offspring.
Lists imagist foundations. Poetic imagery, concentration, compression, suggestive words. Notes confinement to narrow circle. Mentions Eliot, Spender, Lewis, continuing methods with new approaches after imagist's demise.
Explains imagist doctrine. Select suggestive words, define meaning diminishes power, poetic music and ambiguity of sonic meaning, opening vague horizons.
Observe Shakespeare rich in imagery, surpassing imagist, but lacked compression. Shelley also aligned with imagist calls for images. Notes new poetic school in England directed word with new psychological orientation.
Where words for Shakespeare, Shelley, imagists were clear, conveyed meaning from conscious mind for specific images. Modern poets use words for psychological connotations, subconscious meanings, creating atmosphere, feeling, vague suggestion, not just clear image.
Criticizes this school for excessive subjectivity, expressing obscure illusions, leaving interpretation open.
Returning from deviations, reiterates scientific character is hallmark of new poetry, aiming to keep pace with life, influenced, influencing, vital, and the living, sharing feelings, understanding, addressing in their language. Rejection leads to mutual rejection.
States poetry in this era urges clarity, understandability even for shallow culture. Contrasts past descriptions of bewilderment with Spender's modern analogy, anesthetized on operating table.
Notes modern poets' willingness to use common words previously avoided, chosen now for accuracy, clarity, harmony, aligning with realism and simplicity, sincerity.
Moving to chapter 12, the message of ethics. Begin citing Buddha. Avoid harm, pursue happiness for self, others, emphasize personal judgment over tradition, sacred books without understanding, logic, senses, old ideas, appearances, teachers.
Notes scientific perspective. Nature decides good, Darwin's survival of fittest, explains issue. Fittest for survival, often strongest, but Darwin later included cooperation as ideal.
Mentions philosophical view. Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. Good is innate. Quotes St. Augustine. Good ethics self-evident, individual conscience. Criticizes. Conscience varies, changes with conditions. Napoleon example.
Introduces sociological view, Durkheim. Ethics are social habits imposed by society. Criticizes. Superficial coding wiped out by circumstances. War, disease, love, anger.
Presents Jung's psychological view. Introverted, primitive child, inward versus extroverted, civilized outward ethics, without stating which is better.
Concludes no inherent good evil. Actions judged by result, direct, indirect, near, far, individual, others, benefit leading to happiness. Details Bentham's utilitarian utility principle, happiness is pleasure, avoid pain, criticizes, confuses pleasure, happiness, overlooks other happiness, art's beauty, flawed calculation.
Connects ethics to environment, presenting three types.
1. Religious environment. Ethics based on reward punishment, focus on afterlife. Criticizes lack of earthly applicability, weakening faith.
2. Agricultural environment. Ethics centered on cooperation, mutual help, land preservation. Actions leading to these bring happiness.
3. Industrial environment. Individual struggle, late maturation marriage, decreased family value, changed views, chastity motherhood, increased anxiety repression, decreased security stability. Happiness differs greatly here.
Explains internal motives, determine directions, environment shapes expression. Concludes building ethics psychologically requires good choice in marriage, care for environment.
Okay, chapter 13, the message of Russian literature. Why so important? Nagi says its immense significance is as 19th century revolution against known trends, emotion, reason, mix. Notes rare harmony between emotion, reason, usually separating writers.
Russians achieved this harmony and added two more levels, spirit and nerves, Dostoevsky's focus. Tolstoy added level of life, required emotion, spirit, nerves, life. For new literature, spiritual level is general characteristic, innovation.
Argues while spirit addressed before, Russians penetrated it directly, boldly, frankly, addresses simple, sincere spirit inclined to goodness, remains strange to those used to Western reason, order, logic, form, need extensive reading to understand this new consciousness.
Summarizes first importance, searches secrets of spirit. Second, examines human behavior directly, stating unity between law of reason and law of morality. Separation is origin of error.
Criticizes practicality for accepting imperfection, submitting to chaos. Contrasts with Russian belief. Deficiency relates to perfection. Inseparability of politics, spirituality. Faults West for separating politics from spirit religion. Argues religion cannot be exclusively private, impacts individual others.
Explains Russian conscience doesn't accept literalism practical side of law, action separate from belief. Holistic mentality unites them. Human behavior involves practical action and opinion belief, relying on spiritual background. Judging action alone insufficient. Opinion belief part of ultimate personality, potentially beyond choice.
Acknowledges alignment with objective scientific theory, but notes science's harshness compared to Russian literary mind's warmth, compassion.
Summarizes third importance. Not condemning punishing without absolute justice. Highlights forgiveness, pardon, endurance. Questions who condemns judges rewards, punishes one who perceives truth, requiring search beyond hidden forces.
References Christian saying, God is truth, Christ is creation, notes Russian writers Christian. But contemplative approach led them to admit glorification of truth made Christianity narrower than to encompass them. Concludes, as long as good devil are mysteries, Russian literature distinguished by thirst for absolute, fascination with unknown.
Let's turn to chapter 14, the message of modern art, focusing on surrealism. Defines it as leap in intellectual development requiring understanding relationship, emotion, thought. Poses questions. First, humans' thinking depiction. What led to change? Return to instinct better, as modern suggest.
Defines abstraction. Using mind properties without visual perceptions, intellect based on logic. Developed during evolution, initially limited emotional abstraction tied to visuals, focused on sanctification and fear. Quotes Levi-Bruhl. Primitive mentality, undifferentiated, sensations, emotions, part of perceptions.
Summarizes consciousness development. Attempt to separate emotional realistic elements, leading to symbols, letters as concepts. Second stage, symbols taken for themselves in elemental abstraction, Hegel's philosophy.
Describes art's parallel path, moving emotionally, then needing symbols, words, lines, signs. Diminishing importance of symbols indicating content, separation from reality, fading as symbols, becoming mental activity. Mentions Hegel separating mind art, viewing art as adolescence, defending logic, art about senses visuals, not symbols.
States, instead of abstract denotation, must create living denotation phenomenon, the artistic work. This is modern art. Explains surrealism applies this psychologically, taking cognition's nucleus of idea.
Against Hegel-Kant's logic asserts existence of equal unconscious forces. Advocates revealing opposites to increase consciousness by associating conscious-unconscious. Contrasts Hegel's logic with Lautréamont Picasso's dreams. Aquinas' logic with Gothic church's imaginative construction. Argues for unleashing compensatory repressed forces in poetic form added to logic reason. Modern work must address senses, be based on emotion effect, reveal idea and equivalent opposite.
Quotes Breton. Surrealism, new style, not doctrine, but philosophy of life, seeking lyrical chord of subconscious within humanity's society. Mentions recognition by Goethe, Rilke, Wordsworth, but true revelation by Freudians. Surrealists aim for its supreme importance alongside natural outside, inner world, dreams, vision, hypnosis.
Concludes philosophical tendency is extreme romanticism resisting classicism's rationality. Wisest surrealists based art on some reason wisdom, achieving art's aim, believes future belongs to this mixture.
Moving to chapter 15, the message of parents, beginning with hysteria, a new study. States hysteria predominantly affects women, historically. Notes modern psychology's new understanding. Previous understanding? Nervous disease from emotional conflict in those with narrow consciousness, deep subconscious. Repressed content seeks outlet via sympathy acting or physical symptoms. Tremors, convulsions. Prevalence linked to perceived female makeup.
Explains modernly hysteria symptoms in children, links to other diseases, epilepsy, rheumatic chorea, led to renewed research. Mentions Dr. Adlam asking intellectuals doctors for opinions.
Summarizes general agreement. Hysteria is screaming revolt when life unbearable. Doctors added two groups, inventing illness for purpose, deviant outlook leading to emotional physical symptoms.
States Dr. Adlam confirmed these. Added two other types, Loss of consciousness, memory loss, simple to complete amnesia. Memory can return, but sometimes disappears permanently without mental disturbance. Physical disturbances can relieve repression or escape problems. Frequent urination as escape.
Highlights paradox. Disease from anxiety requires treatment via covering up, calm indifference. Poses question. Who succumbs? Who remains safe amidst common troubles, repression, conflict?
States modern definition. Hysteria is an emotional disorder affecting patients with a special personality, the histrionic personality, characterized by acting, exaggeration, dramatization. Acting can be external, politicians, businessmen, or internal artists.
Connects women's natural external nature, adornment, to significant exposure. Asks when this personality becomes ill, if necessarily afflicted. Notes differing opinions on origin, born versus acquired. States mild degrees produced vital, cheerful, immortal personalities enriching art, literature, society.
Explains many with histrionic personality live hidden without symptoms until wounding event. Concludes for parents. Hysteria symptoms appear between childhood and adolescence. Histrionic features show early, actions, play, after cognitive maturity, can collide with pathological factors home, conflict, alcoholic father, screaming mother, or school, harsh teacher, mischievous peers.
Describes impact on external tendency, lost confidence, withdrawal into fear doubt covered by shouting, and internal tendency, isolation. Notes children and adolescents rarely have physical symptoms like paralysis.
Explains treatment requires understanding situation. Parents must prevent child achieving goals through these means, but also recognize address fear by encouraging in new situations. Monitor school life. Calm, dignified home, primary protection.
Finally, Chapter 16, The Message of Happiness. States happiness ultimate goal. Defines it as ambiguous word like poetry love believed in, but ethereal. Questions why universal goal unclear and shared.
Discusses Bertrand Russell's book. Research misery's causes, then state happiness is avoiding them, logical but impractical. Questions how to avoid life's annoyances, injustice, hypocrisy, lies. Notes Russell's view of happiness as reflective phenomenon for making others happy, but lacks explanation how or if duty leads to happiness, soldier example. Questions joy versus happiness.
Summarizes Aristotle. Happiness is spiritual activity that leads to practicing virtue and excelling in that, embodied by philosopher. Questions applicability to 20th century, if virtuous philosophers truly happy, potential torment.
Mentions modern psychologists view happiness as life's ultimate goal, smaller objectives aim towards it. Connects message of happiness to message of life. Questions if isolated life practicing idealism fulfills life's message. Asks effect on saint observing human conflict, guide from above or descend to help. Advocate's ladder.
Quotes prophetic saying, every one of you goes forth in the morning selling himself, so either frees it or destroys it. States psychology of happy life lies in freeze it, adapting to environment without selling out or rebelling destructively. Analogy. Sailing boat, navigating ways until people learn practice virtue, spiritual consciousness, distinguishing humans and animals, fulfilling message of happiness life.
And asks how one adapts, requirements of balance. States practical method based on observation experience only way. Lists basic rules for 20th century ocean, understanding addressing different mentality psychologies, men, mind, logic, eloquence versus women. Emotion. Simple but often unknown principle from current reality. Many other established rules exist for those who investigate, want to adapt without losing personality or selling selves.
Advocates being practical, believing happiness is spiritual activity related to goodness, truth, requiring flexible mentality, give stakes while retaining character. Concludes practicing happiness becomes habit with faith, training.
And with that, we conclude our incredibly comprehensive journey through Ibrahim Nagi's Message of Life. We've explored his profound reflections on everything from, well, the origins of existence to the ever-present pursuit of joy.
Touching upon his insights into the essence of literature and art, the multifaceted nature of civilization, the intricate formation of personality, the fascinating evolution of the human mind.
The unique challenges and immense potential of youth, the crucial role of insightful criticism, the often puzzling dynamics of political behavior, the timeless magic of storytelling.
The significant shifts in modern European literature, the fundamental principles of ethics, the distinctive perspective offered by Russian literature, the abstract and often challenging world of modern art.
The enduring influence of parents, and finally that universal and often elusive quest for genuine happiness. Quite a range.
It really was. Our mission, as always, has been to carefully extract the key insights from this rich and diverse source material, providing you, our listener, with a valuable shortcut to becoming well-informed on a truly impressive range of interconnected ideas.
hopefully giving everyone some solid takeaways.
And on that note, we leave you with a final provocative thought, drawing inspiration from the concluding remarks of Nagi's insightful work. He contemplates the existence of what he suggests are essentially two forms of truth.
Right, a lesser truth through senses and mind, and a greater truth through inner awareness beyond mind and senses.
He observes that humanity has largely navigated its journey using only this lesser form of truth, often realizing that the apparent summit we have painstakingly reached is, in the grand scheme of things, merely a foothill on a much larger mountain.
It's a humbling thought. He even touches upon the return of Western scientific inquiry to the ancient wisdom traditions of the East.
And their emphasis on practices like briefly emptying the conscious mind to connect with a more infinite and intuitive intelligence for inspiration.
So the closing thought for everyone listening.
Consider for a moment which of these truths resonates most deeply with you, and perhaps take some time to explore these profound ideas further in your own way, prompting a deeper reflection on the very nature of knowledge and the many paths we might take to understanding ourselves and the world around us.